Hello and welcome to Wednesday in Parliament. The main news from Westminster. The Prime Minister bows to demands for a policy document on Brexit.
I can confirm to the House that our plan will be set out in a white paper published this House.
The Labour leader is worried about what the government has in mind for Brexit Britain.
The Prime Minister, Mr Speaker, is threatening the EU that unless they give in to her demands, she will turn Britain into a bargain basement tax haven off the coast of Europe.
Also on the programme, rousing words from the Chief Minister of Gibraltar.
My blood is red, but I'm red, white and blue inside out, and so is that rock, and we will never, ever countenance changing that.
That was a most passionate
Come and see for yourself.
and eloquent answer.
But first, when the Brexit Secretary David Davis came to the Commons on Tuesday, after the government lost its case in the Supreme Court, MPs from all parties called for a white paper setting out a strategy for Brexit. David Davis batted away their requests, pointing to a speech the Prime Minister made last week. Well, it looks as if in just one day there's been a change of heart.
The Prime Minister laid out a clear and bold plan for Brexit in her speech last week. Honourable members quite rightly want an opportunity to scrutinise that plan. Does the Prime Minister agree that the best way of facilitating that scrutiny would be a government white paper laying out our vision for a global Britain based on free trade in goods and services that will be to the benefit of us and other European countries?
Prime Minister!
Well, my honourable friend raises the question of parliamentary scrutiny. I have been clear, as have senior ministers, that we will ensure that Parliament has every opportunity to provide that scrutiny on this issue as we go through this process. But I recognise I set out that bold plan for a global Britain last week, and I recognise there is an appetite in this House to see that plan set out in a white paper. My honourable friend's question, the question from my honourable friend, the member from Broxtowe, last week in the same vein, and I can confirm to the House that our plan will be set out in a white paper published this House.
The Prime Minister has wasted 80 days between the time of the original judgment and the appeal, and has now finally admitted today, after pressure from all sides, that there's going to be a white paper. Could we know when this white paper is going to be available to us? And why it's taken so long to get it?
Prime Minister!
Can I say to the right honourable gentleman, he asked for debates. I was very clear there would always be debates in this House, and there have been and will continue to be. He asked for votes. There have been votes in this House. The House voted overwhelmingly for the government to trigger Article 50 before the end of March this year. He asked for a plan. I set out, as my honourable friend for Croydon South said, a clear plan for a bold future for Britain. He and others asked for a white paper. I've been clear there will be a white paper. But what I'm also clear about is that the right honourable gentleman always asks about process, about the means to the end. I and this government are focusing on the outcomes. We're focusing on a truly global Britain, building a stronger future for this country, the right deal for Britain and Britain out of the European Union.
Jeremy Corbyn was critical of the Prime Minister's negotiating stance.
The Prime Minister, Mr Speaker, is threatening the EU that unless they give in to her demands, she will turn Britain into a bargain basement tax haven off the coast of Europe. Well, Mr Speaker, we on this side of the House are very well aware of the consequences that would have. The damage it would do to jobs and living standards and our public services. Is she now going to rule out the bargain basement threat that was in her speech at Lancaster House?
Prime Minister!
I expect us to get a good deal for trading relationships with the European Union. But what I'm also clear about is that this government will not sign up to a bad deal for the United Kingdom. And as to the threats that the right honourable gentleman claims about what might happen. And he often talks about this, he uses those phrases, he talks about workers' rights. Perhaps he should listen to his former colleague in this House, the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, who has today said, to give credit to the government, I don't think they want to weaken workers' rights, and goes on to say, I've seen no evidence from the conversations I've had with senior members of the government that that's their aspiration or their intention or something they want to do, which is good. As usual with Labour, the right hand's not talking to the far left.
The Prime Minister is heading off to the United States on Friday to meet the President, Donald Trump. She's one of the first foreign leaders to meet the new president. On the agenda are discussions about trade deals and security. The Prime Minister insists she will not be afraid to speak her mind.
I'm pleased that I am able to meet President Trump so early in his administration. That is a sign of the strength of the special relationship between the United Kingdom and the United States of America, a special relationship on which he and I intend to build. But can I also say to the Leader of the Opposition, I am not afraid to speak frankly to a President of the United States. I am able to do that because we have that special relationship, a special relationship that he would never have with the United States.
Mr. Speaker, we would never allow Britain to be sold off on the cheap. How confident is she of getting a good deal for global Britain from a president who wants to put America first, buy American and build a wall between his country and Mexico?
Yesterday, the government lost in the Supreme Court, and today we have a very welcome U-turn on a white paper in regards to Brexit. So in the spirit of progress for Parliament, in advance of meeting President Trump, will the Prime Minister tell Parliament what she wants to achieve in a UK-US trade deal?
Well, it's very simple. We want to achieve an arrangement that ensures that the interests of the United Kingdom are there, that are put first, and that's what I will be doing, and that we see a trade arrangements with the United States, as we will be looking for with other parts of the world, that can increase our trade, bring prosperity, bring growth to the United Kingdom. And then my aim for this government is to ensure that that economy works for everyone in every part of the United Kingdom.
Ed Miliband.
It brings it.
Right honourable gentleman never knew he was quite that popular. Ed Miliband.
I was going to say, Mr. Speaker, it brings back memories, actually. Can I say to the Prime Minister that as the first foreign leader to meet President Trump, she carries a huge responsibility on behalf not just of this country, but the whole international community in the tone that she sets? Can I ask her to reassure us that she will say to the President that he must abide by and not withdraw from the Paris Climate Change Treaty? And in case it is helpful, can she offer the services of UK scientists to convince the President that climate change is not a hoax invented by the Chinese?
Prime Minister!
Well, I recognise the role that the right honourable gentleman has played in looking at this issue of climate change, and I hope he recognises the commitment that this government has shown to this issue of climate change with the legislation that we've put through and the changes that we have brought about in terms of the energy sector and uses of different forms of energy. The Obama administration obviously signed up to the Paris Climate Change Agreement. We have now done that. I would hope that all parties would continue to ensure that that climate change agreement is put into practice.
Gibraltar's Chief Minister has been speaking passionately to MPs about the historic links between the people of Gibraltar and the UK. Fabienne Picardo was giving evidence to the committee on exiting the European Union. Gibraltar voted to remain in the EU because of concerns, the Chief Minister said, about Spain's intentions. He was asked about the border between the British Overseas Territories, which is not a member of the Customs Union, and Spain, which is.
Gibraltar has always had what I see now described as a hard frontier in the context of potential future relationships between the UK and the European Union. But that doesn't mean that goods don't flow into Gibraltar. They take a little longer. Those who are involved in the logistics of getting things into Gibraltar, know that they need to allow 2 or 3 hours for their vehicles to come through the commercial gate. They'll be inspected. There'll be documentation to prepare. But if you get into the rhythm of things, this can be quite easy. Although, of course, there are days if the Gibraltar football team has scored a goal or been allowed into UEFA, for example, that we might find that the frontier, for some reason, doesn't work as well as it might. So this is more about goodwill than it is about the rules, necessarily.
So would I be correct in understanding that difficulties occur at the border when politicians, the Spanish, choose to be difficult? Is that correct?
That would be absolutely the way that the people of Gibraltar have traditionally understood it for the past 35 years since the border opened.
But if the Spanish choose to be cooperative, then the border operates in a fairly fluid fashion.
In an absolutely fluid fashion that doesn't interfere with anybody's lives and enables people to move across that frontier and for goods to move across that frontier without more control than is necessary.
During the 2 hours of questioning, the Chief Minister paid tribute to the Conservative former Prime Minister, Sir John Major, calling him a champion of the rights of the people of Gibraltar.
Thank you for what you said about the former Prime Minister. So easy to airbrush people when they've gone, and it's rather nice that you say what you do, so thank you very much.
I soon expect to be discarded as well, and I hope people are kind to me about what I've done last night. Political life.
It is indeed, but there's always a chance of revival, political life. So I wouldn't worry too much about that.
The former Tory Cabinet Minister Michael Gove joining in the laughter there. And there was applause when the Chief Minister defended the right of Gibraltarians to British citizenship.
So why should we change? We are born British. That rock is red, white and blue for us. There is nothing else that we have known. The system of government that we know, the system of education that we know, the makeup of my understanding of the world is British. How can I suddenly now do something else? I can speak fluent conversational Spanish, but I don't speak professional or political Spanish in the way that I might be expected to should I need to navigate the waters of the Spanish system. You look at the Spanish political system today, it doesn't have much to commend it to the people of the world. I mean, the British system, we criticize ourselves so constantly and so constructively that we make it stronger. That's the system that we believe in. That's the rule of law that we believe in. The Supreme Court that ruled yesterday and that everybody respects the views of. That is what makes up the Gibraltarian. My blood is red, but I'm red, white and blue inside out. And so is that rock, and we will never, ever countenance changing that.
That was a most passionate
Come and see for yourself.
and eloquent answer.
The committee chair, Labour's Hilary Benn, speaking there after clapping and desk banging. A very unusual sight at such a hearing. You're watching Wednesday in Parliament with me, Christina Cooper. The schools in every constituency are going to lose money, Labour has warned. The party's Shadow Education Secretary, Angela Rayner, said that flew in the face of a promise made by the previous Prime Minister David Cameron before the general election in 2015.
A pledge that was repeatedly made by the last Prime Minister, the one who actually fought an election, and he was very clear what it meant. He said, "I can tell you with a Conservative government the amount of money following your child into school will not be cut." There is one question that the Secretary of State has to answer today. Will she keep her party's promise to the British people? The National Audit Office has told us their answer. They have revealed that on the current spending settlement there will be an 8% cut in pupil funding between 2015 and 2020. That was the same conclusion that was reached by the Institute of Fiscal Studies. This means that there will be schools in every region, every city, every town and yes, every constituency losing money because of the failure of this government to protect funding for our schools. I'll make some progress. So will the Secretary of State tell us whether she intends to keep that manifesto pledge?
We want to see every child with the same chance to do as well as they possibly can, no matter where they are growing up in our country or indeed where they're starting from academically, and that's why we have to make sure that resources going into the system reflect the high ambitions that we've got for every child wherever they're growing up and are distributed as well to that effect. And indeed, because of this government's economic policy that's seen jobs and growth and indeed careful management of public finances, that's how we've been able to protect the core schools budget in real terms over the course of this Parliament. And in fact, the investment in our core schools now is the largest ever on record, totalling over 40%. I'll give way to the honourable gentleman.
Because the Secretary of State for giving way. David Cameron's promise was that the funding per pupil would be protected. It isn't being, as we've heard, and in my constituency, because of the formula, it's being reduced further per pupil. Why is David Cameron's promise being broken?
Exactly. It's not. We are protecting also the per pupil funding as well. And we know that in relation to making sure funding is fairly apportioned between schools, it is time that we now look at the school funding formula to make sure we bring one in that is rectifying the current system that is unfair and outdated, as the Right Honourable Member for Wokingham set out. And at the moment, the situation all schools face is that funding isn't distributed evenly across our country, and it doesn't take account of pupil needs.
Now, we've heard a few complaints from the House of Lords about the problems faced by travellers on Southern Rail, which has been subject to months of delays and industrial action. Well, one peer has come up with a novel solution, replacing it with a roadway for driverless vehicles. He wondered if the government would commission a feasibility study.
Lord Lucas. My Lords, I beg leave to ask the question standing in my name on the order paper.
My Lords, we have no current plans to commission such a study. However, we are investing over £100 million in research and development into connected and autonomous vehicles, and a further £100 million into testing infrastructure. We have commenced a programme of regulatory reforms that will keep pace with changes in technology as it comes to market. And we continue to invest in our national rail infrastructure through transformative projects like Thameslink and Crossrail to meet ever-increasing passenger demand.
My Lords, I'm very grateful to my noble friend for the access that he gave me to Department of Transport officials and contractors, and congratulate him on the progress being made by his autonomous vehicle projects. Would my noble friend not agree that the successful pilot currently underway at Heathrow demonstrates the potential of autonomous vehicles to serve on a branch line such as Lewes to Seaford, and that if we demonstrate success on that line, it is technology which would suit very well the peripheral parts of the southern network. And if we succeed at that, we shall have an industry which we should be in a great position in an industry with worldwide applications, which is just what we're trying to do with the industrial strategy.
My Lords, we welcome the cutting-edge nature of transport innovation in the rail sector. In particular, my noble friend talked about the new systems and the new operations at Heathrow in terms of the pods which are being used. And certainly there are other parts of the rail network, such as the DLR, and indeed with new rolling stock, which will be coming online from Siemens on Thameslink, that there will be a use of technology and autonomous vehicles in what I believe to be in controlled environments. He mentions about further innovations in terms of the wider network. I think it's important to recognise that we need to see how technology can be adapted on existing systems.
The wisdom of closing down 100 local tax offices and creating new regional hubs has been questioned by a Commons committee. Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs is reducing its service from 177 offices around the country to 13 offices in regional cities, as well as 4 specialist centres. Officials say the changes could save the taxpayer around £500 million. But at the Public Accounts Committee, one MP doubted that figure would be achieved.
Originally, it was assumed that there'd be efficiency savings of about £500 million, and already that has reduced to £212 million. So this looks to me like it bears all the hallmarks of one of these cases where ministers say, we need some savings, they're provided, and then it turns out that they're slightly illusory. Do you believe that the 212 million savings will be achieved, or will this all just disappear to zero at the end of the day?
So no, I don't believe it'll be 200 million. I think it'll be significantly more than that. You are seeing this project well before the main gate business case is approved. And there are advantages to that, clearly, because you wanted to be involved early. But there also, what you're going to see is a bit of fluidity, therefore, in the data, we would expect our current estimate of the savings is the other side of 300 million, which is a very long answer to your question.
So it started off at 500 million, then it became 212 million, and now you're saying it will be over 300 million.
Yes, and ultimately what we'll have to do is put that all together in a business case to go to the Chief Secretary by the end of March, so you'll have some further data there.
My understanding is that 40,000 HMRC staff will have to move office. Do you think that might be too much too quickly?
It's actually spread over quite a long period of time. It's spread over 5 years, and for the vast majority of the 38,000 people who will be needed to move, they're not moving that far. As the report says, the average is 18 miles.
But let's say you have someone in your, I think you've got, am I right in saying you have an office in St Ives or Redroof in Cornwall, and then we move to Bristol, which is a long way, or indeed Inverness to Edinburgh. And let's say you have some expertise in that office. Is there a risk to corporate memory with this kind of programme?
Yes.
How do you manage that?
I'm slightly struggling with how we ask people to give us that corporate memory, but it is definitely something we have to solve. I mean, if you've been working in Redroof for 32 years and you're not going to go to Bristol, meanwhile we're going to recruit more people in Bristol, we have got to find some way in which the knowledge that you've built up about how we've worked over the years can be translated into systems, or the wisdom of giving it to other people. But at the minute, we do not have a solution that I'm aware of for that risk.
And we end with a piece of parliamentary housekeeping that's starting to worry some MPs: how to carry out the renovation work that the Palace of Westminster so badly needs. There are a host of problems in the building, which is a World Heritage Site. The plumbing fails regularly, causing leaks that damage the interiors, and the electrical system is faulty, increasing the likelihood of fires. And for good measure, there's a lot of asbestos that needs removing. There are strongly held views on whether MPs should move out or stay while the work is carried out. Labour's Chris Bryant says the best and cheapest option is for everyone to leave.
Many people think it's falling down. It's not falling down, though the clock tower does incline a little. But the mechanical and the electrical engineering systems that keep the place lit, heated, cooled, drained and dry are already well past their use-by date. And the risk of catastrophic failure, such as a fire or a flood, rises exponentially every 5 years that we delay. We should be in absolutely no doubt there will be a fire. There was a fire a fortnight ago. There are regularly fires, and people patrol the building 24 hours of the day to make sure that we catch these fires.
Chris Bryant was on a parliamentary committee set up to examine the options. In a report published last September, it recommended that everyone should move out.
We, today's MPs and peers, hold this building in trust. It's not ours, we hold it in trust. Our predecessors got it hideously wrong in the 19th century. They kept on delaying necessary work, and that delay made the fire in 1834 not only possible, but inevitable. And so we lost the Painted Chamber, St Stephen's Chapel, and what was reputedly the most beautiful set of medieval buildings in the world. And then they insisted on staying on site whilst the new building was built around them, and constantly complained about the noise and the design. The result was long delays and a massive budget overrun.
But Sir Edward Lee thinks parliamentarians should retain a presence in the Palace of Westminster.
As during the Second World War, the House of Commons debating chamber should at all times retain a presence in the Old Palace of Westminster. Now, it's known, and this was briefly alluded to by the Honourable Jennifer Ronda, that there is an alternative, expert, independent point of view, that instead of building what I would deem to be a folly, costing £85 million of a replica chamber in the courtyard of Richmond House, that we should, as in the war, use the House of Lords chamber.
We've reached a point, Mr Flello, where make do and mend is simply not an option. That approach has already been taken. It has led to decades of underinvestment, which we are now forced to confront. Much of our infrastructure is well past, in some cases decades past, its life expectancy, its planned working life. The government has undertaken to provide time for a full debate and a vote in due course on the committee's report. Time is... In due course, as the honourable gentleman knows, time is always at a premium, and I know he will recollect that from his own duties in this place. Time is always at a premium for business managers, and particularly so at the moment with developments. Yes?
Well, it's all very well, but to be honest, due course is the kind of phrase that weasels use, because it means you don't really intend to do it in any expeditious way.
Responding to that accusation of weasel words, the Minister found another phrase, promising that the Commons would consider the matter as soon as possible. Well, that's it for now. Do join me at the same time tomorrow for another roundup of the news from Westminster. Until then, from me, Christina Cooper, goodbye.